recording started.
Okay, we're good. Good evening. Today is Thursday, July 17, 2025. My name is John DeRay. I'm the board president, Newburgh Large City School District. This is a special meeting, and we will begin with Ray Bergarelli and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone can please remain standing for a moment of silent meditation. Thank you. Call the roll.
Ms. Christine Bello,
Here.
Ms. Thomasina Bello, Ms. Boucher, Mr. Bergarelli,
Here.
Ms. Burks, Mr. DeRay,
Present.
Mr. Howard, Mr. Levenstein,
Here.
Ms. Politi.
Here.
Thank you and welcome. For the past several years while I've been on the board, the idea of a forensic audit on the district has been circulated. And February 5th of this year, we issued an RFP to do a forensic audit. And the results of that we're going to discuss in public tonight. It's very, very important that this gets done for the community. There's been rumors and innuendos about what goes on in the school board or what goes on in the system the last several years, and I think the presentation you see tonight is going to put a lot of those to rest. When I became board president a few weeks back, I worked with Onyx and I said we have to get this out there. And after the meeting the other evening, the next meeting's not until August, and I thought that was too long. So one of the reasons for the meeting tonight is to get this out there. We're very fortunate tonight to be joined by Keith Bala from O'Connor Davies, and Melissa Zott. So you have the floor.
Thank you for having us come to present our report. We have it in a PowerPoint as a brief summary. I don't know who has the clicker to move it.
Just say next slide.
Oh, next slide, please. So this is myself, Keith Bala, my partner, Melissa Zott. We ran this particular engagement. The scope of services, you'll see, covered 13 different areas we were asked to look at. The budget and financial reporting process, capital projects, Proposition 5, which was a capital project, the energy performance contract, also capital projects, grants, general fund activities, special aid, budget transfers, claims reports, and treasury reports, school lunch, check registers, and Medicaid reimbursement. So we looked in each of those areas. Next slide, please. So the RFP was issued on February 5th. Our contract was signed on March 15th. We began work. We wound up putting in approximately 400 hours in time with 6 different professionals from our firm, combined over 90 years of experience in this area. We performed our field work through the end of May and then did our analytical work and the report and issued our report dated June 20th.
And just to further elaborate on our experience, our firm has, I'm part of the subject matter expert. I'm the external auditor aspect of this. And our firm also does external audits of 45 school districts within the Hudson Valley region. We do have 90 years of experience, plus including our internal quality review, which was also a subject matter expert. So we did go through the results in detail as well.
So I just want to explain a little bit about our process. So initially with this particular project, laying out the scope of services. We had each of those categories. We estimated time for interviews, review of documents, analytical testing, follow-up on each particular area. Then we budgeted time between staff, senior manager, partner level, who would spend how much time, and then we prepared our budget with that. So our initial budget for the entire project was $316,000. We completed this project, it's about $175,000 to complete the project, so substantially below what the contract amount was for in getting that done. Next slide, please. So as part of this process, we interviewed 35 different individuals from the administrative side, management, principals, department heads, outside contractors, numerous documents, bids, contracts, financial reports, capital project reports, grant files. And then we did testing on payroll access, budget versus actual variances, grant expenditures, EPC contract testing, fund balance reserves, and claims testing. Next slide, please. Okay. Going through all the particular analysis that we did, the interviews, observation, and review of the activities, we didn't find any fraud within any of the areas that we looked at. So, and all the individuals we interviewed, nobody was a whistleblower either to say, hey, there's fraud going on in this particular area either. So mismanagement, we noted areas where management had weaknesses in reporting, controls, and in particular in the budgeting area in terms of weaknesses. And then underutilization of funds, grants that weren't fully leveraged to support students. So we'll get into the specifics of those. Next slide, please. Okay.
So there were 6 core issues that we really identified as part of this process. The report is pretty lengthy, as I'm sure you know, and you can see. I think what we try to do is the pages that were really important to the findings and the conclusions of our report are found on page 39 through 43. The meat of the process of what we went through this report were on pages 8 through 38. So I think that's really important for the community to hear as well. What we decided to do, we really looked through the findings and wanted to prepare a presentation that was easily digestible and kind of categorize the findings into something that had similar themes as well. So the 6 themes we identified were budget process gaps. The controls within the budget process, really looking to see how many transfers are being done, which we'll go through later. Fund balance mismanagement, as you know, the school district was over the 4% at June 30, 2024. So we'll go into details about that. Delayed or missing reports. As Keith mentioned at the start of this, we looked at the treasury report and the claims reports, as well as any financial reports that the board receives. So we'll go over that. Capital projects, they did lack oversight. We do have some recommendations here. And then your procurement process, as well as your system access control. So that's access into the actual general ledger software itself. And then overall, I think it just brings out the lack of financial transparency. I think part of a school district is just having that transparency with the board and the community to make sure that we're all aware of what's happening at the school district. The community does vote on the budget, so any amendments to the budget should be communicated to the voters, should be clearly identifiable so that we know what the taxpayers' money is going towards. Next slide. Okay, great. So this is the budget process gaps, which we talked about. So what we did, we looked through all of the budget transfers at the school district. Again, our fiscal year that we covered as part of this process was fiscal year ending June 30, 24. So that was July 1st of 2023 through June 30, 2024. So during that period of time, there were about 210 budget transfers made, which totaled in the aggregate $56.1 million. When we looked at the explanations of those budget transfers, it wasn't always clear what the reasoning was behind the budget transfer. I know it's a system-generated report, so there's a little bit of a limit on what you can put there, but when it does come to the board, it would be good to have a clearer message on what these are for, how come this wasn't included as part of the original budget process. Ideally, the budget that gets passed, as I mentioned before, would be great to be the budget that you finalize with, but there's always unknowns that happen. You can do budget transfers, which would just be going from one line to another expenditure line. A budget amendment would be when your budget increases overall, which in this year there was due to an emergency project where you utilized fund balance. So recommendation here is just to make sure that if you do have budget transfers being made during the year, that you really get an understanding as to why they're happening. And hopefully trying to prevent that in the future through a really thorough budget review process, looking at your historical expenditures, projecting that forward to try to really get a good idea of what you think you're going to spend in the upcoming year.
Yeah, just to add on that, for the budget process, it's always good to have the actual to actual with the prior year and actual to budget two-year comparison. I think it opens it up to more questions as to what the current year is really going to be. So, because if you just compare budget to budget, the actual may not have been close to the budget. So the actual to actual, actual to budget, and comparing year by year, side by side, I think is very helpful for the board in making decisions if you have that on a going forward basis.
The next thing we noticed was the transfer threshold, responsibility to review every single transfer that comes through. So you do want to set a threshold limit. I did review other school districts about your size, and they did have varying transfer limits. Some were at 500,000, some were at 20,000. I think what's important to note is that you really have to identify how many transfers are being made at the school district, and if there's concern that there's too many transfers, you could definitely lower it, so adjust it accordingly. We did feel, just based on the significant number of budget transfers being made, that potentially 100,000 was just a little bit too high. Possibly when your budget transfers get limited to just maybe for year-end overexpended lines, you could potentially adjust that as well. Then we did interview, like Keith had mentioned, 35 individuals across many different departments, including principals and facility staff. And based on the interviews, we received a lot of responses on the budget process. We really wanted to get an idea on what was happening, what their input was, or their view was of the budget process. Did they feel like they had input during it? Did they feel like their voices were heard? And did they get some feedback on the requests that they had submitted for this process? So based on the interviews, we did identify that at times, and this is not across the board, but at times there were some instances where certain budget requests were just not followed up. So there was no follow-up communication. If an individual had requested a specific item, there was no return of, I'm sorry, we can't do it this year, or yes, we can definitely have a budget transfer later on during the year because we have extra money to spend. And then a resolution, so either communication or identifying what the conclusion is. In other instances, during our interview process, we did identify, just in general, that there's no specific formal training provided to individuals who are new to the budget process. I think that would really streamline the whole budget process, because you do have a lot of steps leading up to it where you're meeting with the department heads, the principals, you're getting a lot of information. And so somebody who is new to the process really should have a good understanding so they can clearly vocalize what they would like for their department, what they would like for their students, and to benefit them. So overall, that was what our budget process was.
And the state actually has a very good handbook on that budget process, and you know, the parties to include, including the community input as well. So it's a very helpful tool.
Next slide, please. Thank you. The next theme of the findings that we had was fund balance, mismanagement, or just projections really overall. As we mentioned, the general fund balance did exceed the 4% cap. The calculation of the 4%, it's required to be in your financial statements, so it's in the back of your financial statements if you're curious on how it's calculated, but it would be your unassigned fund balance divided by your next year's budget. So that's how you would calculate out your 4%. One big thing that happened, I think, is that it seemed to be unexpected that you would be over the 4%. And I think it's really important to have those projections regularly throughout the year so that way you can project out your expenditures. Your state aid, you're going to know based on the reports that you can get from the New York State Education Department online. So you could easily project out the revenue side of things. And then utilizing those projections, you could come to a rough estimate on what you think the fund balance projections would be at the fiscal year end. So that way you could utilize maybe setting up reserves. We all know you have capital projects on the deck, so I think it would be good. You do have a large capital reserve balance that you could utilize, but if you do have money left over, or if you are projecting to be over the 4%, you could potentially pass a board resolution to set up or add to a capital reserve fund. So just having those projections will help with budget planning. The next one was the emergency resolution. As I mentioned earlier, you did have an emergency that occurred during June 30, 2024. When we looked at the resolution, generally what I see when I view emergency resolutions is I will see the specific dollar amount, the specific reserve fund that it's being drawn down from, so that there's no confusion as to what specific reserve you're going to be utilizing. When I looked at this resolution, I did see a dollar amount, but I did not see a specific reserve, so I had to kind of verify. I looked at last year's financial statements, so that's June 30, 23. I looked at this year's financial statements to really compare between the two to see which reserve did it get taken out of. So best practice, I think this all goes in the same boat of transparency, making sure that everybody understands what money is being utilized to fund these different emergencies or projects. And then potential use of the capital reserves for project shortfalls. When we get to the capital projects, they'll kind of tie in as well. You do have, I think it's like over $30 million in your capital reserves at June 30, 24. And then you also do have a project shortfall on your capital projects. So really looking at the fund balance as a whole and trying to identify how can we save taxpayer money by potentially using these reserves in the future or to help fund these shortfalls would be ideal. Of course, you need certain voter authorization, some planning associated with that, but it all goes to kind of looking at the fund balance as a whole and trying to identify how to use these reserves for the best use of the taxpayers. Next slide. Great.
Yeah, the treasurer's reports, this is one of the areas where the tool for the board is the treasurer's report. Having them late or delayed or missing, that's a real shortcoming for the board. So it's really critical that the treasurer reports are submitted every month and complete and comprehensive. Otherwise, it's very difficult to make informed decisions if you don't have the data and the tools to do that. So.
I think when we looked at the treasury report, when they were submitted, I think all but one had 100% of everything that was required to be from the commissioner's, the New York State Commissioner's office within it. I think there was just a budget status report that was not included in one of them. But other than that, they were complete as far as what's required. So I think that's good. It's just having the timeliness of those reports, making sure that you have, once you have the data in front of you, you can make really timely decisions appropriately. The claims auditor's reports, what we looked at, The claims auditor has a really nice sheet that identifies what specifically they are looking at when they're going through their audit of all of the invoices and transactions and payments that are being made. We really liked the sheet. I thought it was very nicely laid out. What we did also do is we compared that sheet to the job description of the claims auditor, because we want to make sure that they're looking at everything that they're tasked with doing. In doing so, we did identify that there were several items in the job description itself that were not on the claims auditor checklist. So it would be good for that to be included. Things like making sure they're following the bidding procedures, making sure that there were certain approvals on there. It's all listed within the report as well, so you can go through and see the specifics of what was missing. And ideally, when we went through the actual claims testing, so we selected a sample to see, were there exceptions that maybe the claims auditor did not identify. When it came to everything except for the capital projects invoices, we found almost no instances where there wasn't an issue. The two issues we did find during our claims testing of the non-capital related items were specifically related to not being competitively bid. One instance was an Amazon purchase. I think it was like $30,000, a little around $30,000, but it was individual items that were under the capitalization threshold. New York State requires, they just released a new procurement guide, a local management procurement guide that you can look online. And what it does is it really is trying to get a handle on circumventing the procurement process and what your competitive bidding procedures are. And the way that you can circumvent it is by buying individual items that are individually below your bidding threshold. So what we try to do is look at the vendor list as a whole and see, did you buy anything from a vendor that in total exceeded that threshold? So in this instance, the Amazon purchase did go over that. In addition, I think there was a $74,000 gym refinishing that also did not go out for a competitive bid, which that was also over the threshold. And again, those were not on the claims auditor's checklist. So I believe that if the claims auditor had that on the checklist, that would have been identified and caught at that point. Lastly is a grant status provided to the board. It's not necessarily a requirement that a grant status report be provided to the board. It is something that the business office is overseeing. What I think is when we went through the grant status, we looked at the list of grants that were applied, a list of grants that the school district did not receive. I also pulled down a lot of the New York State Education Department reports, which are all public information. So what's nice is you can draw that down and it'll tell you how much the budget was that the school district received. It will tell you how much was actually spent and how much was unspent. When we did that, we identified that there was about $4 million of unspent American Rescue Plan Act money that the school district received. That project did end on September 30th, 2024, so there's no longer any expenditures that can be applied against those funds. So essentially, those are funds that potentially would need to be returned if they were drawn down. If they were not drawn down, then the school district would just not be able to spend it to support the students. And lastly, the title and various grants like IDEA grants. There are potential carryovers of about $2.5 million. There's always going to be a little bit of unspent money when it comes to some of these grants. It shouldn't be a significant amount. 2.5 million is a little bit significant. The school district does receive a lot of grants, so relatively speaking. But you can carry over these New York State education grants. You are limited to a certain percentage, and that does change depending on which grant that it is being applied to. But what you can also do is you can reach out to NECSD itself and request for there to be additional monies carried over, and you would go through that process. So we suggest, if not already done, I would suggest trying to do that for the 2.5 million, and then just having, similar to your capital project link schedule that you have in the financial statements, doing something similar for your grants if you're not already doing that. Essentially, that would be a listing of your grants, the budget that you have, the time period that that budget can be spent, so you can plan for that end date, your current cumulative expenditures, your cumulative revenues, which generally should match, and that will give you how much money you have left to spend. So that way you can plan for it. So if you see that $4 million and you know that that September 30th is coming, you can plan accordingly and apply those expenditures to get them covered.
Yeah, so ideally, whenever possible, this way you have the tool, you could spend down those grant monies first, so you don't lose anything on the back end.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for capital projects, overall, I think it just really lacked a little bit of oversight for what we saw. We did look through the facilities committee meetings. There is a facilities committee that the school district has. When we looked at the meetings, there were no meetings held during the fiscal year, June 30, 2024. I did identify in the report specifically the dates of those meetings, so you can see like when exactly they had them. After June 30, 2024, so starting July 1st, there were facilities committee meetings that did occur, so I put those in there as well, so you could see exactly how many actually happened. I think facilities committee meetings are really important. It helps keep track of all of the projects, and then you would want to have a board liaison or somebody to come back to the board and really present on the status of the project, so that way you know that they're keeping on track, they're keeping within the budget. If there's going to be an planned overexpended or even unplanned, that would be communicated early, so you can, with all of the financial reports you can plan accordingly. So I think that's really important to make sure not only they're happening, but that there is somebody to come back to the board and report that.
And you have a lot going on, so there's been a lot of activity, so it's really critical. It's not like it's just one project. A lot is going on, so in terms of monitoring the various projects and the costs and what's occurring and what's getting done, or if you switch professionals with architects, then you lose efficiency, you lose time, and you're pushing the project later then with higher costs. So all that factors in as well. So the regular meetings with facilities, helps to keep everybody informed and keep the priorities in place, moving forward.
As we mentioned before, we did interview a number of people. We also, not only employees, but we did interview some contractors, some architects, and what we identified through many conversations is that there was just a lack of communication between the district and the construction manager. I think there was a little bit of frustration because everybody, through all of our interviews, I'm sure Keith can echo this, is everybody really cared about the students and they really wanted to support the students. And we saw that even from a contractor position as well. They really wanted to come and benefit and communicate with the facilities committees and be on board through the project from start to finish. So just making sure that there's a full collaboration of effort here, so that way the projects finish timely and hopefully within budget. As I mentioned before, the invoices, I had said everything except for the capital project invoices had minimal issues. The invoices for the capital projects, a lot of times we could not identify what specific fiscal year it was applied to. That's really important from an accounting standpoint. We really want to be able to know if it was reported in the appropriate period. We obviously have to accrue it back or put it in the next year, just depending on when the services were incurred. So making sure that that's really identified would help the business office, it would help the external auditors, internal auditors, and your claims auditor.
As well as being project and building specific,
Yes,
so you can really track it.
definitely. We also noticed that there were some instances where not all of the invoices were included within the packet. Or if the invoices were included, there weren't detailed enough invoices to really support. If they're saying they're spending $150,000 on salaries, we'd like to see the individual items below it. I think it's just the due diligence of making sure that the school district's paying for all of the services and that they're for the specific projects that the school district has going on. Next is the data closets. That's your IT infrastructure. There are critical data closets that just lack proper climate control. I think this is really important. There's a lot of data, a lot of student data that the school district has. If you have these data in data closets that are just not climate regulated, there's a possibility that there could eventually be an issue that may or may not be recoverable if you have backups, which we would want to see as well.
Yes. So that addresses both the space where it is, the requisite utilities that you need for that as well, and the ability to cool the area, for the data machines. So
I think this is also ties back to just hearing and trying to identify the needs of the school district and listening to those budget requests and inquiring with the department heads or any other individual who is part of the budget process. What are the critical needs of the school district that could impact the data, the infrastructure, the students, that really could be something that you might want to put on a top priority. The board resolutions awarding the bids. We did go through, as we mentioned, we've looked over 500 plus documents. Included in that were the board resolutions approving and awarding the bids to the various contractors. Ideally, what I would like to see there is in one document to have the board resolutions identify the number of bidders that were received, if the bidder that you awarded to was the lowest bidder. If they weren't the lowest bidder, what was the reasoning? For professional services, you don't always have to go with the lowest bidder. You can go with somebody who has a better expertise or other sort of document, as long as it's documented in the board resolution. I think overall, it provides transparency as well. And then anybody can go back to any resolution and clearly identify, this is why we awarded to this bidder. Projects on the project laying schedule. I hope everybody has looked at the project laying schedule in the financial statements. Again, that's towards the back of the financials. Right now, as of June 30, 24, in your financial statements, your capital project laying schedule lists out your projects, not necessarily by specific project. For example, you have your Prop 4 and your Prop 5 project. Right now, they're just listed as a district-wide bond. And that's okay to do, but you might want to break it, like have sub items or sub lines in there to clearly identify if we have this multi-hundred million dollar bond, how much is going to go towards Prop 5 and how much is going to go towards Prop 4. I think this is really important as well because, again, I think the underlying theme here is transparency. We saw when there was transition between the architects and movement of from one company to another, there was confusion as to, well, how much is going towards Prop 4? How much is going towards Prop 5? Where's this detailed budget? How can we identify and break this apart to appropriately identify, are we going to be under budget? Are we going to be over budget? And it was just really challenging for them to pull apart. So if it's clearly identified in your financial statements, anybody can look at it and say, these are the various projects you're having, this is what your budget is, and you can also plan to see if you're going to be overextended potentially in the future. This will be helpful too, even applying it on a prospective basis. You have a lot of projects upcoming that you could definitely start this process. Additional funding. So as we know, there is your district-wide project is currently underfunded, which is, I believe, your HVAC, the Prop 5. And what we would want is once you've identified that a project could potentially be underfunded, or if you hear from your facilities committee that's regularly meeting that this is going to be an issue, there's unexpected costs that have come up that we could not foresee during this process, try to resolve that as soon as possible. I think what we've seen, I'm sure we've all seen, is this project was approved in 2019 and it's 2025 and costs, obviously pre-COVID, post-COVID, costs have gone up substantially. And now even if you had the same scope for your project, you just couldn't complete it with the same cost that you approved back then. So timely reporting, making sure that you're getting these addressed as soon as possible will mitigate this risk in the future and hopefully reduce costs for the taxpayers as well. Lastly is your energy performance contract. So that's your annual energy report. What we saw, so as part of your energy performance contract, you have an agreement, and part of that agreement is an expected energy savings. That's the whole reason why we go into these energy performance contracts, is to get that savings on the back end. And it's many years of saving, 20 years of savings that you get. And it is required for there to be an analysis of these savings on an annual basis. So part of this contract that you have with the vendor is for them to provide you with an annual energy report. What this will do is it will tell you how much saving, they'll do the calculation, how much savings has the school district incurred to date for this fiscal year. And what's great about this contract is the contract does allow for, if you do not receive a savings, that the vendor will recoup and repay the school district for any funds that any savings that did not happen. So I think that's really important. If you don't receive those savings, you could get paid back from them as well.
Yeah, so the annual benefit's about $1.8 million. So there is a guarantee from the vendor that says if you don't get that, they'll pay it, or you can get other services from them. So.
And I believe the report was due in February. So it was expected to be delivered February 28th, 2025. So after reading through the contract, we inquired, have you received this report to date? Obviously, we were doing it in March, April, May. A report had not been received. I believe they had not followed up yet at that point for a report. So just identifying, reading through those contracts, making sure you know the benchmarks and the dates that are really important for these contracts so that way you can follow up and potentially get additional savings for the school district. Next slide, please. Thank you. Procurement and system access controls, these were kind of hand in hand. As I mentioned before, several purchases exceeded the bidding thresholds with no supporting documentation. So as I mentioned, those Amazon purchases, which were individually under the capitalization threshold, and then that flooring, just making sure that you're looking at it. I would probably suggest having somebody look at the vendor listing. That would be your cumulative purchases by vendor, and just making sure that somebody is just doing a double check that you're not reaching your capitalization threshold, and if you are, maybe let's take a look to see what kind of services. If there's similar services or similar items being purchased, that's something that you know for next year, we should probably go out to bid for this in advance. We could probably get a savings if we plan and know that we're gonna buy in bulk, so. Internal controls over procurement were not followed consistently, so again, I think that really relates to just making sure the packets are really complete. When the claims auditor gets it, there should be everything in the packet, every invoice, every supporting documentation, making sure that that's being followed. Most importantly is the user access control, so that's related to WinCap, that's your general ledger software. We looked at the user access report, and we identified a handful of people who had access. We looked at 4 different categories. Pay schedules, so do they have access to the actual pay schedules? The employee pay authorizations, so can they authorize that payment? Can they activate those payment authorizations? And then can they update their own record? I'm happy to announce that nobody that we identified on this list can update their own record, which is a good thing. But we did identify that the list of people that were in this on page 27 did have all access, is what it was referred to the pay schedules, employee pay authorizations, as well as can activate pay authorizations. And importantly, you do have 2 contractors on here. I believe they assist with some of the accounting or some of the reconciliations. They also had access to this. In my experience with the external audits that I do, I am familiar with these 2 contractors, and they're very helpful with a lot of the school districts that we do business with. I think in general, the work that they perform does not necessarily impact payroll at all. So really limiting their access to the need that they're working on. If they're working on invoices, if they're working on reconciling a general ledger, maybe just giving them view access to general ledger. If they're posting anything, is that really a necessity? Can somebody in the business office post it instead? Because you'd want to have a second review of that as well. And then a temporary access. Whenever you're giving any contractors access to your general ledger software, just limiting it as soon as possible, because you really don't want to give them an open access to everything in the school district. Next slide. So I guess the biggest theme is the financial transparency, just really making sure and kind of sending that home to everybody. Having that transparent financial information for the board and for the public really allows informed decision-making for those charged with governance, for the Board of Education. Like we mentioned, if you had certain reports, if you had information from the facilities committee, if you knew that certain projects were going to go over budget or the grants information, you would be able to plan, utilize your capital reserves, maybe apply some of your expenditures in general fund to these grants that are eligible. And then information silos across the department, just trying to get these information timely to the appropriate individuals so that the communication can be made and decisions can be made. Grant management. It looked like there were several individual departments that had access and managed their grants. I think just having somebody overall look at that grant, like we talked about that grant project length schedule, making sure that there's somebody at least overseeing it so that there's proper oversight so you do get to spend down all of the monies that you have. And then a formal process to just summarize key financial risks. It's important for the board to review the financial policies, to identify, is there any fraud risk at the school district? Is there any financial risk at the school district? How are the policies? Do we need to update them? What can we do to benefit the students and the community? Next slide. So just moving forward, I think that our findings and recommendations that we have, as Keith had mentioned, we did not find any fraud. I think that's very important to note. But we do have really good recommendations and controls that you could take away from this and implement. 4 categories: governance, making sure that you establish a calendar of financial records that you want to see. You currently have positions that have certain job descriptions that require specific reports to the board. But maybe you want something else. Like we said, the grant status report is not required to be reported to the board. Maybe it's something you just want an update on. How's our grants doing? So you know that that's going over well. The board resolutions, that could be implemented right away, just making sure that your board resolutions are clear, concise, transparent, the accounts that are being impacted. If you have reserves, the bidder award, making sure that all the information is included in there. And then your budget, making sure that when you're going through your budget process, you look at your historical spending to date and then what the needs are of this upcoming year. That would really help hone in on your budget transfers that you're making during the year. You're always going to have some budget transfers, as I mentioned, so keep that in mind, but we want to kind of limit it. Your fund management, making sure that you're implementing regular fund balance projections and reserve projections. That would be your fund balance reserves, like your capital reserve, insurance reserve, making sure that you're utilizing those to the best of the ability. All of the budget transfers and amendments that do come to the board, making sure that you have a very clear explanation as to why this is being made. How come this wasn't planned for as part of the budget process? Is this something we need to take into consideration when we're doing next year's budget? Your operations and controls, user permission, very important. Making sure that that's being reviewed regularly, at least at an annual basis. I would suggest maybe quarterly even. If you have people coming in on or off the school district who have access to key modules within your WinCap system, that would probably be important. Generally, IT would be able to do that as well, so you could utilize their department. Centralized grant oversight and making sure that you're fully utilizing all of the grants that the school district has to date, so that way you can spend down those monies.
And we would recommend that you have that as a regular report that gets submitted. This way you see as that goes through the course of the year on the grants.
And for your capital projects, it appears you're doing this now, which is great. Your facilities committee is making sure you're meeting regularly, but then also making sure that that facilities committee liaison is coming to the board, providing a thorough update, and really making sure that you're moving towards the target of, are we going to be under budget? Is there going to be an issue where we're going to have to fund it with a general fund transfer or other funding source?
And with all the projects you have going on, it would really be beneficial to prioritize those projects, top ones, and the estimated time of completion, additional resources needed, to get it through completion, and what are some of the shortcomings on the other projects as you go down the pecking order to put them in a priority as to how we're going to get these accomplished and how we're going to pay for them at the end of the day. If funds run out, do we go into our capital reserves then?
And that's a good point too, because those priorities might change year to year. You might have a priority last year that may be a multi-year project, and maybe something like the IT data sets that are not in an environmentally controlled place. Maybe that's now an issue that needs to be raised to a top priority, or maybe something else needs to be raised. So those priorities may change, but having that clear data will help you. And then I think that goes in line with just separating your active projects clearly within your project length schedule so you can identify that. I think that's it.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question?
I have a lot of questions.
I have one first.
Oh, okay, sure.
Thank you very much. May 31st was the end of the field work, and June 20th was the report. My question is, what sort of interaction did you have with the administration, previous board president, in between that time to discuss these recommendations?
We didn't go through our recommendations with either the administration or anybody on the board. So we took what we had from our interviews, our review of documents, our analytical testing, and then formulated where do we see that there's weaknesses, where we have findings, and what are the recommendations to improve things in each of these categories. So our report, when we issued it, was the first time I think anybody saw any of our recommendations at the end of the day.
Okay, so just for clarity, the recommendations were made, but there was, just for instance, if you made a recommendation about, I think there was one about emergency funding. We'll just take that as an example. The administration wasn't allowed or wasn't given time to say, we may disagree. We think that came from a different revenue source. Is that correct?
So for the emergency funding, the board resolution has to come to the board. You are limited with the emergency funding. It's a quick kind of turnaround that you have to get the funding out. It's just really making sure that the verbiage within the resolution has the specific requirements.
Understood.
Sorry.
I'm using that as an example. In other words, you wrote it down, we published a report, but the published report has the recommendation, but it was never discussed with the school, with the administration prior to that recommendation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bella.
Hi. Thank you for this report. It was very insightful. I have a lot of questions. If you can't answer any of them, no worries, okay? So regarding access and oversight concerns, what was the nature of the contractor's access to employee pay rates? Was it granted intentionally, accidentally, or through a systems loophole? Do you know?
I don't think we can answer that question. We just know that they have access.
Okay,
Ms.
Onyx
Bell,
would like to help with that.
can I answer that question?
certainly.
Okay. So with users accounts to WinCap, as the auditor just reported, and as you may be aware, as being a part of the board last year, there were several contractors in district that needed access to perform their work. We had several vacancies, whether it was treasury, we had business official, business administration vacancies. So contractors were brought into the district to oversee those things and to do the function of the business office in their absences. So when that happens, there is that oversight. And as Mr. DeRay just mentioned, we got the report when it was published on June 24th, and we're looking through that. And customarily, what we're used to as an administrative body, when auditors do a report, that we have a chance to review it and agree or disagree, and also verify the information they're seeing. Each district is different. Each district has different processes and procedures. So, not always having the information also limits them from making the best recommendations. So I really would hope in the future that the administrative body would be able to answer and collaborate with auditors so that they can give the best report to the public. And I think those recommendations we've been looking through, and also will have our kind of agree or disagree with the report. I think that there's many things that were stated that the community is going to have to understand because it is very detailed. So for me, as a person that's in IT and also is a person that previously worked in IT and also would like to make sure those controls, I would like to see what those names are so I can give a better rationale to the community, but I don't even have that information to even answer right now.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions.
That's what I'm saying.
I can't.
Can I just ask a question about that specific
Oh,
topic,
certainly,
about access
certainly.
controls? So thank you very much for preparation for a report, very, very thorough. With that, talking about who had access, during that period of time, didn't we go through a lot of people were, so that there was no indication in there of length of time those people had access. So if a person was only here for a little bit, they would have only had that access for a little bit. It wasn't like the whole year, all of those people had that level of access, correct?
Well, until I see the list of names of who had access, I can give a better report to the board regarding that. I think what's important to know is the district has been using automation for all district accounts for about 4 or 5 years now that is controlled by HR and an individual's start and end date. So if you are disabled or suspended or dismissed or discharged from the district, once our HR puts that date in, it shuts down everything. Our WinKip financial system is governed a little bit differently in that there are access controls and different things. It is a part of the overall system, so if you're suspended or if you are not an active employee in the district or active contractor, you will not have access to our systems. And I think during that time, there were various employees that were governing different aspects of the business office, so they could have had access to those tables. But it's something that I need to see to be able to verify to give the board more clarity surrounding that matter.
Okay. Also, did you notice that there were any changes to employee pay made by these contractors? And if so, how were those changes tracked and approved?
We did not see any changes on the payroll. And just quickly to identify that we did include the names of the individuals on page 27. Again, it is a lengthy report. And oftentimes my experience with getting these user access reports, it is a point of time. It's not, we can't identify all of the changes that happen for the user access. So if somebody was cut off maybe mid-year, we may not know that they had access at. So I believe the report that we received was as the date that we received the report, which we obtained on April 24th, 2025. So this would be the permissions as of that date. Thanks.
Okay, regarding data integrity and employee verification, how does the limited data provided hinder your ability to identify anomalies like duplicate or fictitious employees?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
How does the limited data provided hinder your ability to identify anomalies like duplicate or fictitious employees?
So I believe you're referring to a piece in here related to some information we had requested and were not obtained prior to our issuance of the report. We did get provided a position control listing for 25 that really only included the position, employee, budget account, FTE, and the base pay. Ideally, what we would like to see is, what we requested was to see addresses, direct deposit information, so we could quantify and correlate those, compare those reports. I'm not sure why we did not receive it. It's probably a matter of timeliness of when we requested it versus when we had to get this issued as well.
Were there any red flags based on WinCap access logs or user activity suggesting payroll manipulation or unverified entries?
I believe we just received the user security profile report, so we identified who had access to the modules within WinCap itself, not necessarily the activity within it.
Can I just speak in terms of the employees that are on page 27?
Yes.
That are listed within your report? So upon review, all of the employees that are listed here are members of our human resources or our business office. We have 2 contractors that were board approved to support the business operations in the 22-24 school year. And we have 2 substitutes that were one substitute that was a previous retiree. So their titles might have just been substitute under, and we didn't have a chance to provide you that information to verify. We do have a large business department and human resources staff, so that those are what account for those names.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you identify any patterns that suggest the possibility of ghost employees or misallocation of funds within the special aid fund?
That's this section. For the special aid fund, we got that was all within the same transaction. So again, we just obtained the position control listing. From the position control listing, we reviewed it, but there wasn't any activity associated with that listing, so we couldn't identify that information.
Have Mrs. Roaring add to that question, Ms. Roaring?
So I want to start by saying the process starts in HR. If HR does not create an employee with a position, there's no payroll that's processed. HR assigns the pay rate. HR assigns the position that's associated with that pay rate. So payroll processes what is entered and prepared by HR. HR works in a very detailed paper-driven process that says, this person, based on board approval, is doing this. Then we assign the position in HR, and it comes over to payroll to process the payroll. So this is a multi-step process, and it starts with board authorization. So I do want to make sure everybody's clear on that.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to say thank you for the report. Thank you for coming, showing up face to face, so that we as a board, we as a community can ask you questions in regards to the forensic audit. But if I heard you correctly, you said you found no malfeasance, no fraud, no criminal activity, stuff of that nature in the process of preparing this forensic report. So If that's what people were looking for, hence the questions, I mean, aren't we going around in a circle, looking for things that you said you didn't find? Because obviously the questions that my colleagues are asking are malfeasance, fraud, or stuff of that nature. I know the first three questions she asked would lead to that. But you did state that that was something that you did not find in your audit, correct?
That's correct. We did
Thank
not
you.
find it.
Okay. Well, obviously, he was against the forensic audit anyway, but moving on. Okay, can you clarify which roles had overlapping access to both human resources and payroll functions? And are those roles consistent with best practices for segregation of duties?
So ideally, HR and payroll would not have similar access. Generally, in smaller districts or smaller entities, we might see that be the case. We did list everybody who had access to the pay information. So everybody listed on page 27 would be the individuals. As the superintendent had stated, that there are some individuals on here that might have old employee titles. And those are the titles that we received from the position control listing. Within the titles, there are 3 individuals that have the title with payroll in it. So 2 senior account clerk, 1 junior accountant clerk payroll. It could be that there might just be a title name if they fall under HR versus payroll. Ideally, the individual processing payroll would not have access to the pay rate information.
I think that I can comment on this in saying, I know that Mrs. Roaring just stated that there is a relationship between payroll, human resources, and the fiscal management of the business office. As we've discussed previously, there definitely needs some overview on the processes in the Human Resources Department, and some of the recommendations that you have given us tonight will also help us construct some of those changes to move forward. Many of the individuals that are listed on this list have work within either payroll or human resources, benefits, where some of those things, those accesses may need to be occurring within the scope of their job.
Okay. How vulnerable is the system to insider threats due to the current access configurations, in your opinion?
I would say we didn't do a assessment of risk of your systems.
Okay,
That was not part of the scope of our service.
okay, no problem.
Can I also just say, when it comes to payroll authorization, there is a process by which payroll has to be verified and signed off on. So those things, I shouldn't say those things, I'm gonna get my words together. All payroll, every payment that is made when it comes to salary and position has to be reviewed and approved by the superintendent or the deputy superintendent. So that happens on a biweekly process. Or whoever's in the seat is given a report to review payrolls, to review payment. There's some other processes Mrs. Roaring is going to chime in as well.
I'm just going to go back to the start. The start is the board's approval, and then that governs a multi-step process within the HR office, including sign-off by the assistant superintendent for HR before anything comes to payroll for processing. Again, it is a triplicate form. We still work on paper, and that has to come over to payroll. Payroll's job is simply to verify and activate for payment. They don't change pay rates, they confirm they're correct. If there's an error, it goes back to HR to correct. Once all those things have occurred, then we're running payroll, and yes, that payroll is reviewed by the board's designated certified payroll on a biweekly basis. So there's a lot of steps and checks and balances in this process, and I want to be really clear with the public that we do have those in place.
Okay. I have more, obviously. We, on reserve fund usage, what are the risks of approving emergency expenditures without specifying the reserve fund impacted?
Generally, for emergency spending, there are specific reserves that are allowed to be utilized. So it's not technically allowable to be utilizing your unemployment insurance to pay for your emergency. Generally, it would be like a repair reserve you could utilize. That's what I inferred based off the resolution, and that's what I confirmed was used. So ideally, again, I think the message that I want to make sure is clear is that it's really just a transparent so that there's no question as to what reserve, but the appropriate reserve was utilized and drawn down.
So I really hope and wish that we would have the opportunity to communicate, because I have to say, even just going through the interview process with you, I definitely enjoyed the questions. The report is very clear. But this is one of those information points that I think for the community that we really need to clarify about the emergency roof repair. Ms. Royan, can you give detail to that?
Per the board's resolution, the emergency roof repair, replacement, really not repair, at NFA Maine's West Wing was funded by budget appropriation. There was a $1.75 million transfer in the transfer to capital fund that was used to fund that. And then there was a closeout entry provided by the auditors at the end of the year, but it was budget appropriation that paid for it.
And that those resolutions, and it was not a reserve fund, those resolutions did go to the board.
Moving on. On budget transfers and oversight, how often did transfers exceed $200,000, and what trends emerged from that activity? Or, I mean, you don't have to give me an exact figure. Did you find a lot of transfers that were over 200,000?
When we were reviewing the monthly financial reports that were submitted to the board, there were many budget transfer reports included in there, so that would include those over the 200,000.
Okay.
If I could interject on that, that was an item of concern for the board when you were president, and we lowered that to 50, not based on this report, but based on things that were going on. We lowered it to 50, which is the current threshold.
Just also add that I know that this is an item that is bringing the clarity, because as you mentioned in your statement that within the budget status report, and that was also something that was brought up by a prior board member, there's not a lot of detail that is allowed based on the software that we use. But we know that this is a transparency item that the community wants to know more about, and it's something that we have been working on to provide a full detailing of the $56.1 million and what the transfers were for, and we will have that available. I think tomorrow morning we will have that up on our website so that people can understand in detail, because it is something that we want to provide clarity to around the transfers.
Okay. On facilities oversight and construction management, can you clarify whether Mr. Thurnow's responsibilities were duplicative of the construction manager's role, like a possible duplication of services? It was the construction management company, and then the gentleman that represented the district. I think in there you said there was a possible duplication of
Yeah,
services.
I believe we said there's a possibility of duplicative services, and the main thrust would be to have it specified what his duties and responsibilities are, and the accountability back for that, being that liaison on behalf of the district with the construction that's going on. So it's very crystal clear what he's doing and what the response is, and hold him accountable.
Ms. Bello, before you continue, we're going to take Mr. Levenstein here.
Hi, we could just break it up a little and come back to your questions other people can ask. Thank you. So I just want to see if I'm correct on this. You brought up not using the grant monies to the fullest quite a few times today. So I'm familiar with, at some point, and I think it was the 21st Century Grant, we asked for enough funding for 500 students, say, and then we try to recruit the students to come to the after-school programs, whatever it is, and we may have only gotten 400 students to commit and families to commit to that. So yes, we didn't use that grant to the fullest because we didn't get 500 students. So I believe I'm correct in this assumption, right? That that's happened, where we don't get the full amount that we wished for and that we did get a grant for. So at times, you're implying that, oh, that we're quite, like we're wasting the grant. And you know, technically, maybe that might be true, but we couldn't get 500 kids to sign up for it. So yes, the grant is not fully used. So those things happen, and I just wanted to point that out, because you did talk multiple times about grants not being fully funded. So.
If I may, excuse me. We've never had a forensic audit, so I'm going back to my original question. Is it typical to just finish the report and give the recommendations? Because I think an awful lot of what's going on right now, if there had been a discussion somewhere between May and June 20th, a lot of these things we would have been able to say, well, here's our explanation before we're here with just a recommendation.
Yeah.
So again, the question is this a typical way to deliver the forensic audit?
Typically, we issue the report to the board, and the board asks us to come to meet just with the board, and we meet with the board to discuss the report, and then we would do the public presentation.
Mr. DeRay, can I offer a clarification on the grants piece? May I offer clarification on the grants piece? Okay. So as it pertains to the ARP grant that was talked about a lot in here, I do want to also remind everyone that that did expire in September, and your review stopped at June 30th, so there are 3 more months. The district also was approved for late liquidation. So we had the opportunity to continue to expend those funds after September 30th. And we are in the process of completing the FS10F, which is our final cost report to the state, that's due actually in December, but we're doing it early. So I would not suggest that the number on that report is an accurate assessment of where we will finally end with that grant. To the comment about some of the other grants where we do have the right to carry over, particularly in our title grants and our IDEA grants, that's true. The district has pulled down those carryover funds to support our students. And this year specifically, we pulled down those funds to support summer programming for our students. So we are making use of those funds. We're accessing those funds. We can't always get all the staff we need during the year to do all the programs we want to do, but we are making sure that we're doing our best to access and utilize all the federal funds available to us.
I think that what's also important to note is that in application and liquidation of every grant, it's important to have a grant manager. That's a position that was recently filled, because we do understand that we do qualify, but there has to be management over the funds. And it is something that we work tirelessly about obtaining the grants, but we also have someone to manage. So I think that those recommendations were good, and I think for our title grants, it's important also for carryover to make sure that we have, sometimes there's things that we want to produce or provide for students or even faculty for professional development or different programs to support different learning. And some of those carry-on funds are pulled down throughout the year to support those different initiatives. Ms. Roaring?
I do want to just add that the district has for a very long time had a director of grants whose primary job is to oversee the grants, the expenditure of the grants, and work with the grant program managers to ensure that we're accessing those dollars and utilizing those dollars. That position was filled until November of 2024, where we had a brief gap. That position has been filled again, and that person is doing that work.
Dr. Mack, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I appreciated Mr. Levenstein bringing up the point that sometimes we do post for positions within grants, and whether it's position or whether it's students that we need, we cannot always ascertain everything that we need within it. The other thing that's important is that a lot of our grants are very scripted. So what we can purchase and cannot purchase and can do and cannot do is also scripted. So sometimes we do have a carryover.
And just to be clear, I also see that as well with a lot of my school districts. So making sure that there's appropriate planning associated with that is very important. You are kind of bound by the structure of those grants. So making sure you identify the carryover, apply for it, and if you do exceed those thresholds, that you can automatically carry over to do that, process. So, thanks.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, thank you for your report. And I need to ask you a question. So a lot of the findings that you have, did part of your work include looking over the auditing committee report, the internal auditor's report, and the external auditor's report? And if so, was there any communication with the district with what we or they were doing to address those issues? And was that part of your research and your report? And I ask that because a lot of the things that was part of your report, some of that work is already started in the district and it is being done. So was that process done in that way?
So the RFP that was put out, I believe, you could tell me if I'm wrong, was precipitated by the audit report in the first place, I believe, when the auditor issued the report. If I'm not correct, I'm not correct. So the audit report for the prior year had certain items in it. Those were specific items that we were asked to look at as part of the forensic audit. Items that were selected items identified in the
Right. So
audit.
in your work, did it include conversations with the district level leaders about what they were doing to address those concerns from those reports?
So, just quickly, so part of the RFP process was to analyze certain variances and explain why there were certain fluctuations. In order to do so, I did go through the external audit financial statements. I also went through the general ledger detail to see what really caused these fluctuations, and all of those are explained within the report as well. We did stick to the specific requirements within the RFP. Anything that we have found or was requested as part of the RFP process, we did inquire and interview each individual about those specific areas.
Okay, so something very simple, and I believe Mr. DeRay mentioned it, the $200,000, that was already addressed,
Yes.
but you made this a part of your findings. So I'm talking about things like that things are already being addressed or have been addressed. Was that part of your work?
So we did see that the 200,000 was addressed subsequent to June 30th. We did go through, and that was a concern of ours initially. Our report does go through the period of fiscal year June 30, 2024.
Right.
We didn't do anything subsequent to that fiscal year date, just because that was the specific parameters of the forensic audit
Okay, thank you,
report.
because I only asked, because some of the work that in your findings and your recommendations are already being done. So I was curious, were you aware of that?
I did see the 200,000 through my research through the minutes.
But there are other things also, but I'll leave that,
Thank you.
thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Levinstein.
So I've said this before, what precipitated this forensic audit was a conclusion in search of evidence.
I have a lot more. Moving on to the school lunch fund. What were the key drivers of the 1.4 million loss in the school lunch fund for fiscal year 2024?
So there was a $1.4 million loss within the school lunch fund. And in the report, if I could just read an excerpt, was important. It says, while this might seem concerning, the New York State education regulations limit the total fund balance allowed to be maintained within the school lunch fund to be no more than 3 months worth of operating average expenditures. This cap is essentially designed to make sure that to maximize the student benefit and encourage proactive spending. And as of June 30, 2023, so the prior fiscal year, the district was in excess of this cap of 1.9 million. So I would anticipate that the school lunch fund would have a loss because you want to be proactive about spending down those monies and benefiting the students.
Okay, based on your review of the food service operation and its expenditures, did your findings identify any inefficiencies in staffing, duplication, particularly in the leadership roles?
I believe the RFP process asked us to identify the specific expenditures and not necessarily look at the potential waste of the expenditures within there.
Okay. Okay.
I can respond to that.
Oh, thanks.
There is an assistant director in food service, which position has been vacant for a couple of years now. So we actually do need that position to properly exercise oversight over the multiple sites that we serve. The biggest driver of that shortfall was participation by students, which drives our revenue, and the significant increase in labor costs and food costs that we're seeing year over year. And we have shared with the board several times that we are continuing to see that pattern. And so that's something we're monitoring closely because we know we need to return that to at least a break-even status. And in the interim, we are using our fund balance. However, the state education department also allows for us to provide them a plan to spend on that fund balance, and the district has done so in compliance with that.
Thank you. Can I just ask, how close is the current excess fund balance of $370,728 to triggering noncompliance under New York State education regulations?
For the school lunch fund?
Yes.
Give me 1 second, please. So as of June 30, 2024, it's on towards the end, Exhibit 11 is going to be where this calculation is included. So June 30, 2024, we also included the prior year calculation here as well. Your 3 months average operating expenditures were $3.6 million. Your assigned fund balance in your school lunch fund was $4 million, so you were in excess $370,000. In June 30, 2023, you were in excess 1.9, so you did bring that down. I also think it's important, and I believe that this is included in the report as well, starting effective June 30, 2025, the regulations have increased now, so it's not limited to 3 months expenditures, it's now limited to 6 months expenditures. I think with the costs escalating and increasing, they're trying to allow for more flexibility within the school lunch program. So I would assume, not knowing we didn't, again, look forward into June 30, 25, but I would assume that you would be under the limit now with the higher threshold.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me 1 second. Just for clarity, the report says July 1st, 2024. You're saying July 2025.
The calculation would be done as of fiscal year end. So it is effective July 1st, but the calculation will be done as June.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and as far as the scholarship fund oversight goes, despite no red flags in the staff interviews, was any review conducted to validate the use and disbursement of the $101,930 in miscellaneous revenue tied to scholarships?
Right, we didn't touch
Is that the special purpose fund, correct?
The scholarship fund,
it.
I don't believe that was in the scope of.
okay.
Yeah, we did not look at the scholarship fund.
Okay. Okay. Medicaid reimbursement variance. What explains the significant $423,821 variance between budgeted and actual Medicaid revenue?
So it looks like that the page 37 to 38 is where the Medicaid reimbursement responses are. We have seen that Medicaid reimbursements, at least in my experience in multiple districts, have exceeded the budgeted amount. So I didn't find this extraordinarily unusual as part of my review process. The reimbursement is based on the district's compliance with certain federal requirements of Medicaid participation, and I believe it is being monitored.
So I just want to also answer, just for clarity for the public, our Medicaid reimbursement, there's certain services within Medicaid over the PPS restructure about 2.5 years ago, where we started billing for certain services, and the rates of reimbursement are contingent upon reimbursement from the federal government. We do work with a Medicaid compliance officer that helps us make sure that we have our submissions and that the district is maximizing its Medicaid reimbursement by getting those consents in. So there is going to be variances, and sometimes Medicaid is something that can be difficult to project based on the federal reimbursement rate.
Okay. Okay, I want to. Okay. On the capital projects, can you break down the key factors that contributed to the 7.8 million deficit in capital projects as of June 30th, 2024?
Yes. So on page 13 of the report, I specifically identified 2 projects that resulted in the $7.8 million deficit. The first one being the Smart Schools Bond Act. I think it's important to note, and in my experience as well, that the deficit is not indicative of overspending or mismanagement. It really reflects a timing of reimbursement from New York State Education Department. It is typical with Smart School Bonds Act funding that we've seen a significant delay between the project completion and the receipt of funding. So this is really in line with what our experience is as well. In addition, governmental accounting requires a modified accrual basis. Generally with grants, you are required to incur the expenditure and then record the revenue, so you have a net loss of 0. Unfortunately, municipalities, including school districts, have an availability period, which does not allow the recognition of revenue for these receivables that are currently outstanding. If you were a corporation that did not have this modified accrual basis of accounting, you would essentially be able to recognize the full amount of reimbursements that are currently outstanding with NECSD. So if that were the case, then that would be a net of 0. So it's just an accounting deficit. For the second one, so that was 3.3 million. The second one was 4.4 million. That's your capital bond district-wide project. The 4.4 million, I noticed on your capital project link schedule in the financial statements, generally what I'll see on the very last column is going to be your bond anticipation note payable. Again, this is also an accounting deficit. I like to have those 2 columns side by side. It helps the community understand clearly that even though, and I did put it on page 13 as well to make it a little bit clear, even though you do have a $4.4 million deficit, you have a $15 million bond anticipation note. A bond anticipation note is a short-term financing obligation. It is the best use of the school district to issue these short-term 1-year bands is what they're called. So that way the school district doesn't have to incur significant interest expense and debt service payments for something that's just a short-term cash flow. Normally what we see is once the project is completed, you would roll the bond anticipation notes into a general obligation bond or a serial bond, public improvement bond. This would allow at that time for your amortization schedule of your bond to be the same as your useful life of your fixed asset, the capital asset, which in this case would be your district-wide project. So that would kind of fall to the government-wide at the same time.
I really appreciate that explanation, because I know the community will see there were several indications within this last, where some of that work was done, correct, Mrs. Roy?
So I would like to just add a couple things quickly there. The district did not engage in bond anticipation notes until I started with the district. What they had done was they did a long-term serial bond for the first part of this project, which resulted in significant debt payments with no work being performed. So when I came to the district, we started to do bond anticipation notes on an annualized basis, which, as you note, is a more cost-effective way to get the cash flow necessary to do the capital projects. As we have closed out capital projects this year, we're looking at issuing a permanent bond during the 25-26 school year that will roll some of those band dollars into a bond, and we will continue to exercise use of bands as we finish out the capital project that was approved in May of 2019, because it is in the taxpayers' best interest.
On the IT infrastructure risks, did the current data closet storage conditions pose documented threats to system uptime or data integrity?
Excuse me. For the data closets, Ms. Roaring, if you could clarify, have we not budgeted money and have those in process to be fixed?
So with the start of Mr. McGrath as your CIO in January of 2025, one of the things that he and I agreed needed to be prioritized was the data closets, whether it's conditioning and security of the data closets. The board approved a large transfer in May of more than $1.9 million to fund that work. A PO has been let and that work has started.
Do you have any idea when that was approved? What month?
May,
The 1.9? May?
yes.
Okay. I wasn't president in May.
So on the energy grant, was there any documented communication from Johnson Controls explaining the missing energy report?
When we conducted this process, we did inquire and request that the district reach out and obtain the report. And we did not receive communication subsequent to that, but I'm sure that there was communication after.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Roaring, have we since received that report?
We have received that report, and we've identified an internal person who will be following up on that on an annual basis while we continue to recruit for our long vacant capital projects manager who does that work.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me see. Capital projects, hold on. Okay.
You want to hear? Thank you.
First row, I need to ask. Okay, I was a little bit troubled to read that some staff submitted budget requests but never received follow-ups. What systems can we implement to ensure budget communication is not only timely, but documented and actionable?
I believe currently, from the interviews that we conducted, there is a formal form that is required to be filled out. I think it's a budget request form is what it's called. Through the interview process, that is the communication we received. Unfortunately, we can't test the communication that's gone back and forth, especially if it's not in writing, if it's just a verbal meeting. So ideally, there should be some sort of documentation, but you have the form. There should be a place for signing it, dating it, and then so there's going back and forth between.
So I think also, Mrs. Bell, I know that we had a previous audit about the budget status process and some of these things. And I think that was a question also from Mr. Howard, because there's been additional audits, additional looks at our processes and procedures. And we had a special audit this year on our budget process. And I know that Mrs. Roaring can kind of go through that as well.
So I'm going to start by saying there is a very structured process by which they submit their requests. Those must be dated and signed by the individual making the request. They are compiled and reviewed in my office with the Director of Facilities. We then share out any recommended action items with the executive team for full review and potential proceeding. Once those decisions are made, after the voters have approved the budget, I emailed them. I have written communication back to them as to whether or not it was approved or not approved. And we
also
did
worth-
have a budget consultant that reviewed the budget development process, and I don't believe he had any recommendations for the board at that time.
I think it's also important to note that during that process, sometimes there are different requests that are made by building level and division level leaders where there are ways for us to fund those requests during the school year. And those are also communicated through and by Mrs. Roing.
Okay. Well, I just basically want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for your hard work on this. And I did support the forensic audit because when the external audit was presented to us, there were so many red flags that I felt, and the majority of the board felt at the time, an obligation to investigate further. So one of your first comments tonight about the actual cost of this forensic audit was, music to my ears to hear that it was, so much less than anticipated. But I appreciate your hard work, and the findings make it clear that key financial practices, in some instances, have strayed from both state law and common sense stewardship.
Excuse me, excuse me. Ms.
Excuse me, it did.
That's not the opinion of the board, that's the opinion of you. Let's just be clear on that.
Okay,
That's not the
so
opinion
in
of the
my
board.
opinion, according to the report, a surplus of over 16 million was hidden behind tax increases. Critical financial reports were withheld despite persistent requests, and core responsibilities within our financial leadership were left unmet. So do we ignore these findings and revert to a system that favored silence over transparency, or do we honor the recommendations, lower the thresholds for unchecked spending, and institute the oversight we owe to the community? Because I don't believe it's about politics. It's about protecting taxpayer dollars and restoring trust and ensuring our schools are governed with the accountability they deserve. So I stand with the facts, and I stand with the auditor's call for reform. And I think it would serve us well if we follow their recommendations, and it can only, make our district better. And I appreciate the report very, very much, and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Bello. I have a couple of comments on that because I happen to agree with you. We should look at the audit. We should make adjustments where necessary. So I had some meetings today with our staff, and 42 recommendations. Out of the 42, 22 have been agreed to and are already done. 11 out of the 42 are agreed and in process. 7 out of the 42, we may disagree with the recommendations and have to go back and discuss it with you. So we do take it seriously. It's in process, and we're not going to leave the meeting thinking that all of these things going on aren't being addressed. They're taken seriously, and they are being addressed. Thank you. Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. President. And like I said, I want to thank you for the report, but I also want to clarify some of the findings that she said that you found. I didn't hear that from you. So I guess just for clarification, I don't want to keep you standing anymore. It's just I need people to understand what she said she heard you say. I didn't hear that. So thank you for your report. Thank you for your time, and have a great summer.
Just to respond to that, Mr. Howard. No, there is a need for a response. I didn't hear it. I read it in the report. The report is quite lengthy. So
Thank you, Ms. Bello.
I'm just saying that.
Mr. Bergarelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Bell, you just made an allegation that the district hid $16 million from the public. Can we get an answer about that, where the $16 million was hiding? And did the auditors find a hidden $16 million somewhere?
I'm not quite sure what Mrs. Bello is referring to. I don't know if the auditors have a question. I'm not sure what she's referring to.
All right. The reported surplus of over 16 million was unexpected, especially after a tax increase. That's the 16 million.
On the January, thank you for clarifying because I didn't hear that in your statement. So on the January 28th meeting, Mrs. Roaring and myself explained the surplus in detail. And many of the unexpected revenues came from Medicaid reimbursement. They came from unexpected earned interest. Mrs. Roaring said, help me fill in those other two gaps.
The other area was increased excess cost, state aid. And we also at that time outlined how we had allocated those to the reserves, which was approved by the board back in June of 2024, and how we would be using the excess to support the budget for 25-26, and we were true to that in the proposed budget to the community.
And I think that the other thing that's important in that conversation as well is that this was also explained and reviewed by our external auditors.
Very transparent.
Thank you.
Can I just comment as well?
Go ahead, Ms. Politi.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience, especially in the redundance of questions that were asked of you. I appreciate it. So I think that, again, I want to clarify that the auditors did not call for any kind of reform. But we do have some work to do, and thank you for all of the information that you gave us. And I think that now we can put this very costly witch hunt to bed. Oh, one more thing. I just want to restate for the record, on the first slide, it clearly states no maleficence, no malfeasance. So we can clear that up right now.
Thank you, Ms. Politi.
There's more benefit to a forensic audit. I mean, I know, it was our obligation, I'm sorry. I know you didn't agree with that, Ms. Politi, but I really felt with all the red flags coming out of the external audit that it really was our obligation to investigate a little bit further. And I'm thrilled. I was not, hoping, for that.
Please.
So I'm very happy with the results, but the recommendations, if we listen to them, we will only have a better run district. That's all. And I think it was well worth the expenditure.
It would be well worth it to have board members who would educate themselves on the processes as well.
First, I would like to say thank you for your presentation. I'm a newly elected board member, so I just came on July 1st. And from a community standpoint, speaking as a community member, the impression was put out to us that there was fraud, that the suspended superintendent was doing something wrong. I just want to personally say thank you for coming to clear that up tonight, to let the public know that there was no fraud and that the superintendent did the best that she could. Yes, there was some discrepancies, but no school district is perfect, and there will be some discrepancies. But to put out to the community that there was fraud and that the suspended superintendent was doing something wrong and to mislead the community, and then to come up here with 10,000 questions and have them all proven wrong, I think that's a serious issue. And I think maybe we should sit back and analyze and rethink how we represent this district. Thank you.
This will close it out.
What? Yeah, I don't know who you're talking about putting that out there, because I know that we did not. So that's all. I just want to make.
I'm talking to Miss Christine Bello.
That's misinformation.
All right. We're closed
Okay.
out. I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, item 3, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Who's doing that tonight? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I just needed to thank the auditors. So for tonight's consideration, we have agenda items 3.1 for your consideration.
Get a motion and a second on 3.1, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this item?
Mr. Bergarelli,
Yes.
Ms. Burks,
Yes.
Mr. DeRay,
Yes.
Mr. Howard. Yes. Mr. Levenstein.
Yes.
Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello.
Yes.
Thank you, that concludes my items.
Thank you. Can I get a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
Point of order. There's public comment on agenda items, Mr. President.
I apologize, public.
There's one person signed up to speak on agenda items, Mr. President, and that's Ms. Tracy Wallace.
Do I get more than 3 minutes because I'm the only one? I'm sorry. Okay, okay, so I did have a few questions for clarity. As mentioned, there was not a facilities committee. When I was looking through committees, my question was the comments that were made during this report. The question I had was, do the Buildings and Grounds Committee discuss the same things as the Facilities Committee? As for this report, they said you didn't have a Facilities Committee, and the Audit Committee has discussed some things that were missing from this report that I thought that you guys had in place in reference to them saying that there was a Facilities Committee missing. I was just thinking of the other committees that you had that could address those things that the report or that was stated today that wasn't addressed in those committees. The grants, I think, a question I had, but I think that was answered. So for clarity for the community, that grants, just because we have an access, just because we have a lot of grants does not mean we could just put the grants anywhere we want to put them. The grants are written specifically, they're specifically for specific items. It's not, okay, we have millions of grants, so, why are we paying taxes? Okay, so the grants specifically are for only things that they are required to pay for. They're not to pay for anything other than those grants are specified for. And then my question on the grants was, the amount of the grants, my question was the grants the state said that you were eligible to have, or were you awarded for? That was my other question on grants. As far as the amount not spent, I was confused as far as you were awarded those. Were you eligible for those grants or awarded those grants? And clarification, transparency for the grants. The other was how much we went over the gap. So in one of your reports, I come to many of your meetings, and so I thought in one of your reports, I read that it was at 5.03% over the gap. So that's a 1.03% over the gap, which was 4% was our gap. I read about large districts that have a lot of money. This is not unfounded, that 1% would be, like, it's not something that would be a red flag. I've been to many meetings where previous board members had said that, going over the gap was a reason to have a forensic audit. And so I just wanted to clarify that the 1% to me was not a red flag, at least in the research that I have read that, and clarified. I would think Mr. Shaw would be here to clarify that 1% is normal. It's not normal to be 1% over with a lot of money. And also the reserves, my concern is, would that be, better for us to have reserves because we have federal funds that are not.
Tracy, we're at 3 minutes, 10 seconds.
Okay.
They didn't start that till late.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. DeRay asked her, I tried to answer some questions, the team answered some questions because this is in relation to the forensic audit. We really want to be as transparent as possible. A thing that we did we wish that the auditors would have known in regards to our capital project presentations is that many of you who have been attending our board meetings on a regular basis often see capital project presentations that are attended by our contractors, our auditors, and they explain their progress. So we do have an updated calendar. Though we didn't meet within a facilities committee, full reports were brought to the board, and we had those dates and those reports associated with that. Is there anything you want to add to that, Mrs. Roy?
I would just remind the community that unfortunately during the 23-24 school year, we really didn't have any committees that met. And so we look forward to that committee structure returning in 25-26, but in the absence of those committees, we did provide updates at board meetings on a more frequent basis that not only talked about the status of the projects, but it also looked at the budget and it talked about the timelines for the work as it was being completed. We really wanted to make sure that that information was still shared, even though we didn't have the facilities conduit. The facilities committee, in fact, replaced the B&G committee back in 22-23, so that committee no longer exists. But as you heard Mr. DeRay on Tuesday evening, they have formed the committees and they have assigned board members to those, so we're looking forward to getting that started.
In terms of the question regarding grants, you are correct. Grants are written with a specific boundaries in which the district may spend that money. So if it's for student program, if it's for MBK, if it's for our homeless students or our outpopulation, those grants have to be spent in a specific way. As a part of our state aid, we do get title funding in which that money has to be spent. So it's limited. There's rubrics that we must fall within to spend that money. We do have carryover at times that we pull down to try to fund many different things. We're actually in the process now of going through our consolidated application process as well as our title funding to allocate those funds. Many of those things are also mentioned and spoken about during our budget development process.
Can I just clarify one thing there? The title money is also known as the consolidated application, and it's not state revenue or state aid. It is federal dollars that flows through the state to us, and it is a very specific application process. We spoke about that a lot in budget development for 25-26 because there is uncertainty around whether some of those programs will continue to provide us grant dollars. So we wanted to identify specific positions that we currently have that are paid by those grant dollars. We also have a significant number of positions that are paid in our IDEA federal funds, which applications went in this week. So we're waiting to see if those are going to be honored in 25-26. IDEA services are largely mandated, whereas title services are not. So depending on how things go with the next federal budget, we'll have to look very carefully at what we can do.
There's nobody else signed up to speak on agenda items. If you would like to address the board on agenda items, please step to the podium.
Dawn Fuchek, Town of Newburgh. I wasn't going to speak tonight, so I really don't have anything prepared, but I couldn't not say anything. First, I want to acknowledge our current acting superintendent and her team for their professionalism and their ability to be here tonight and answer questions not only from the board, but from the community. It's quite refreshing to see that. It's interesting to note that an item identified in the forensic audit around data closets has already been addressed to the tune of $1.9 million. A resolution approved by the 2024-2025 school board, not the board sitting here tonight. And the person asking all the questions about the data closet was the president of that board when they approved the corrective action plan and approved that expenditure. The district already has corrective action plans in place to address the majority of the items that were identified in the forensic audit. If there was communication between the auditor and the district, many of these things would not even have been included in that forensic audit report. There also wouldn't have been all the recommendations that are currently seen in the report because they are already happening due to the implementation of existing corrective action plans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to address the board on agenda items? Please come to the podium.
Mr. DeRay, may I clarify one thing?
Yes, Ms. O'Reilly.
So in the presentation this evening, it looked as though the data closets were a component of the district's approved capital project, and I do want to make sure that the community is aware that that was not one of the scope items in the capital project that was approved back in May 2019, which is why we had to identify another source of funds to be able to proceed with that work, and we did that in our 24-25 budget, and we anticipate that work being completed in the next several months.
Thank you. Anyone else? Get a motion and a second to adjourn?
Second.
Ms. Burks?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.